the North Vietnamese troops surrounded Seoul? What? You'd want out of there, wouldn't you? So American soldiers and any South Vietnamese civilians that worked for the U.S. government would be allowed to be evacuated on American aircraft. So they're going to evacuate them right out of Seoul, get them out of there. Well, they didn't. Yeah, they didn't. They were coming in, and you wanted out because you didn't want to be under their control. Now, American soldiers didn't need this, but if you were a South Vietnamese citizen that worked for the government, American government, you had to have a pass to show to get on the American helicopters to get out of there. Okay? And the signal was when the song White Christmas, we're dreaming of a white Christmas, was played over radio stations in Seoul, which was by Bing Crosby. That was the signal that the choppers were coming in to pick up American soldiers and civilians with a pass. So everybody sat there very tense. As soon as White Christmas was sung by Bing Crosby, which is an old 40s, 30s, and 40s song, when it came over the radios, you knew you had to get to the evacuation point with your pass. If you were a civilian or if you were a soldier, you had to get there. Well, when the evacuation began, American helicopters and ships withdrew the remaining American soldiers in South Vietnam. They would take it from a helicopter to a ship and a ship home. In addition, any South Vietnamese securing passes could also be evacuated on those vessels. Well, if I don't know Aurora very good, and I give her a pass in a big situation to get out of here 10 days early from graduation, and Julie steals her pass, and I don't know the difference, who's going to get out of school? Julie. And that's what happened is these passes, if you had a pass, they didn't check who you were. Okay? So many of these South Vietnamese citizens were transported on depending who they were or who they knew. Okay? Now, think about this. If you were an American GI, and this happened many times, and you got yourself a South Vietnamese wife, you want to leave her there? Does she work for the government? So, I mean, it was a free-for-all getting on these helicopters. Now,
Did you bring your wife or kids?
They didn't have a pass. Now listen, the scene turns ugly. Civilians, helicopters have those landing gear on the bottom. They get full, they take off. These people are so desperate. They're climbing up these stairs to get on this helicopter pad. And they are so desperate, as the helicopter's taking off, they are grabbing onto the landing gear with the hopes that they can hang on to get to the ship to take them to freedom. Many fell to their deaths. That's how bad it got. So crazy that passes weren't even, people were just struggling, anybody trying to get on these helicopters. They lost control. As the helicopter took off, because they were at capacity, people were, not American soldiers, but civilians, were grabbing onto these landing gear and hanging on and flying in the air to these ships to take them to freedom. Many fell and were killed.
Somebody make it?
Some did. Some did.
Did they make them
Now,
back, or did they take them?
no, they took them. If they got on the ship, they took them. Okay? Now, think about this on the Vietnam War. In the end, who took over the South Vietnam? A communist government. So what do Americans think? What have we been doing here? My God, what were we over there in the first place? This is what gives us the controversy over. Remember the Korean War? We accomplished our goal, then we got greedy and tried to go north, then we got knocked all the way back here, and then they finally got to the 38th parallel, and everybody was okay with that. Although some people called that a tie. Everybody considered this a loss.
Is this the only war
Okay.
America's ever lost?
That's what people think. Now, listen to this. Listen, because this is crazy. From 1959 through 1975, 266,000 South Vietnamese soldiers were killed in the Vietnam War. Now, you saw the wall. 58,000 Americans. Can you imagine a wall with 266,000 names on it? 266,000 South Vietnamese soldiers were killed in the Vietnam War from 1959 to 1975. 58, yeah. 19. Now, civilian deaths were just staggering.
When we were on our Segway tour, one of the guys said that there was like approximately 60,000. He said that some people think that it could be 90,000.
For our soldiers? Well, if you look at the ones that haven't returned, and they, and maybe, yeah. Now, listen to this. Guess how many South Vietnamese civilians were killed? 1.935 million. Almost 2 million. Now, if you go from 1961 to 1973, that's an average of 161,000 civilians killed a year. 2 million innocent civilians. Could have been Kim Phuc. Could it not have been? She could have been one of the 1.935 million South Vietnamese civilians. Isn't that incredible? 161,000 a year from 61 to 73. Now, how many Americans killed?
58,000.
Okay, how many, we'll just kind of round these. How many South Vietnamese? 266,000, right? 324, does that sound about right? 324 on the good guys' side. Is that right?
Good guys.
That's the South Vietnamese and Americans. Yeah. You know how many North Vietnamese soldiers were killed in Vietnam? 1.1 million. And they won. 1.1 million North Vietnamese soldiers killed in Vietnam.
Did any civilians die?
1.1.
Just a second.
1.1.
1.1 million North Vietnamese soldiers. We lost 58,000. It's a shame. You saw the wall. How about a wall with 1.1 million? That thing would stretch from the Washington Monument, or excuse me, from the Lincoln Memorial to the Capitol and then some. You know what I mean? Now, how about civilians, right? How many civilians were killed?
Well, we bombed them, so.
North Viet, no, 65,000. 65,000 North Vietnamese civilians killed. That's no picnic, but it's sure a lot less than 2 million. Isn't that incredible? Because we bombed North Vietnam. It's amazing we didn't kill more, but the ones that were getting the heat were South Vietnamese. Now, here's what's weird. Now listen to this. So how in the world do we lose a war in which the opposing team loses 1.1 million soldiers and we lose 324,000? You'd think pretty soon they would what? Run out of them. But here's what here's what historians tell you. The population cycle in North Vietnam, historians believe that they could have fought 100 years and never ran out of soldiers. Because when a kid was born, another kid turned 10, another one turned 15 and went to service. They had such a population cycle going in North Vietnam that historians estimate they could have fought for 100 years and never ran out of population. What also, life was of no concern to the North Vietnamese. We had protests like crazy in this country, over 58,000 killed. Was there any protests going on in North Vietnam? They lost 1.1 million. Loss of life. They were so committed to the goal that they wanted to achieve in Vietnam. Nobody protested the loss of life in Vietnam. How do you win against a country that has no value to life? You can't. There's no way. We should have never been in this. And that's what President Kennedy said, it's their war to win. I get we don't want, there was no way we were stopping this from happening. No way. No possible way. And that's the sad thing about the Vietnam War, is we had no chance to win. Let's talk about some very serious effects that the Vietnam War had on the United States of America. I'm talking about 5 very serious effects that the Vietnam War had on the United States. We already mentioned one of them. The war was the first foreign war we ever lost. The Vietnam War was the first foreign war we ever lost. You know how much this war cost us, start to finish? I told you it was $1 million a day for a while, right? $109.5 billion. Now I'd have to get out my phone to figure out what that would be in today's dollars from 1975 to now. But it, $109.5 billion. Here are the American casualties, and I would not say that these were totally accurate, okay? But according to the latest census, 58,267 KIA, killed in action. 58,267 KIA. This would include any missing that were identified, like Michael Blassie. That was, remember, he was in the tomb. How many wounded American casualties? Wounded? 303,644. 303,644 wounded. 303,644. Missing in action. Many still not found today. 1,711. Missing in action. And we talked about this man and we honored him in D.C. The last American combat casualty in Vietnam, William Nolde from Michigan. And you missed his gravesite. William Nolde from Michigan.
How many were missing actually?
1,711. So there's your third effect. First was it was the first foreign war lost by the United States. The second is the financial cost at $109.5 billion, and the American casualties of war was the third. Fourth was the suffering that Vietnam veterans suffered long after the war, some with PTSD. PTSD, did I say DS? PTSD, no. Mental problems. But here's some problems. This is under number 4. What are some problems that Vietnam veterans had when they got back? Well, more specific, I mean not specific, but what was their life like? What happened to Vietnam veterans? First of all, they weren't very appreciative of it. What's that?
Weren't they treated bad?
Yeah, they would, which led to what? That's what I'm asking.
Suicide?
Suicide, very good. Suicide was certainly an example of serious problems Vietnam veterans experienced. Suicide. What else? Drug and alcohol use. Very good. Abuse. Drug and alcohol abuse. So suicide certainly was an example of serious problems veterans experienced. Drug and alcohol abuse was another one. What else problems they might have? High divorce rate. Very good. Very high divorce rate among Vietnam veterans in this country. High divorce rate. We also already talked about they had a lot of mental and health problems. Mental problems and health problems, depending on their situation. If they weren't wounded, maybe mentally they were struggling big time. I don't think we don't even get sitting over in the jungle getting shot. I mean, we don't get it. Because we never did it. At the end, 75 it ended. I graduated high school in 76. I missed it by a year. Joblessness, unemployment was another problem they faced. Couldn't get jobs. Joblessness and unemployment, which led them to violent crimes. A lot of them became violent criminals.
Could people not hire you because you were a soldier?
No, but
They like a business owner opposed to war.
possibly. I mean, you really could. Or maybe, you you had so many mental issues, you weren't employable, or you had your legs shot off, you couldn't be employable. So number 4 is Vietnam veterans suffered long after the war, some with PTSD, and some examples of problems: high divorce rate, alcohol, drug abuse, suicide, unemployment, mental and health problems, and they became violent crimes. They did a lot of violent crimes. And the 5th effect, and Andrew kind of got to this, is the unfair treatment by the American people who fought for the soldiers that fought in the Vietnam War. many of these soldiers who came home were treated incredibly unfair. Because people didn't like the war. And they referred to these guys as baby killers and everything else from rumors they had heard. So they were serving their country. And I think it's taken until 2000 now to really start making people appreciate the Vietnam veterans. How about the letter I read from Mrs. Larry Burkhart's twin sister? They served their country. They did what they were told to do. They came back after an unpopular war and were treated horribly. And I think the thing that the Vietnam veterans are most upset about to this day is nobody recognized they served their country. They sacrificed in war. Many were killed, 58,000 plus. 300,000 more suffered wounds, 1,700 missing. Okay? They did, though. It was terrible. Well, in March of 1971, Congress adopted the 26th Amendment to the United States Constitution. This was after the Vietnam War. Not after the war, but I mean, March of 1971, kind of towards the end, Congress adopted the 26th Amendment to the United States Constitution. And it had something to do, kind of, with the Vietnam War. Anybody know what the 26th Amendment to the United States Constitution did?
President.
What?
Was it something with the president?
Kind of. What did it do? Think about the war, people that were fighting it.
Oh.
Lowered the voting
that's
age
right.
to 18. But the philosophy is if you can go fight for your country, you certainly should have the right to vote for the person that would send you there. So the voting age was lowered to 18 in both federal and state elections. At the time, kiddos, it was estimated that it would allow an additional 25 million people to vote in the United States. But the idea behind it was, if you can fight for your country at 18, you certainly should be able to vote for the people that are sending you to war. It added about 25 million new voters at the time, is what they said. I don't know what it would be now. One of the, Nancy Pelosi was talking the other day about lowering the voting age to 16 to try to increase voting.
no.
But I think the argument there is,
Bad idea.
you're not, but you don't even know what's going on. I mean,
Yeah.
I think 18's a stretch. But, you know, whatever. All right, any questions on this? Okay, listen up, kiddos. That ends this material. So make sure that you have all these notes in your notebook for the notebook check on Monday. Now, tomorrow we will start the Charles Manson video through the words of Linda Kasabian. Okay, it's not rated X or R, but there is some sexual innuendos. There's nothing you have to look at, but it does kind of refer to some of that. You'll have to live with it for a bit. And then we get done with that. Monday we're going to start the mini-series.
And then you're gonna copy yours next.
Yeah, I maybe could do that now. Let's see if I can do that. What time does the bell ring?
19.
We have 5 minutes.
Okay.
That's 5 minutes. Wednesday.
It was Wednesday, it rings at 24.